Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this special episode of Science of Business podcast. Today, I don't have any guests with me, but in some way, I do have plenty of them. I will be referring several research pieces for you, trying to describe them briefly and what fascinated me when I encountered them. The topic is leadership, and the publications come from multiple resources, including Journal of Applied Social Psychology, including Frontiers in Psychology, including Leadership Quarterly, and more. Let me know. I am nervous as hell. Let me know in the comments and in any form of feedback you like. How do you like it? How do you like this form? If the amount of information I provide is enough, if maybe you need something more to actually make use of what I have prepared. And there are five different research pieces I will be sharing. The first one is on leadership development. Then we will go to a comparison of authentic and transformational leadership in sport. Then overlooked leadership potential, about the gender differences in how leadership is perceived. Then something in a way related, how leadership is perceived in mentoring situations, also among different genders. And lastly, emergence of shared leadership networks in teams. I must say the last one might be the most exciting one, so I hope you stay till the end or listen to it later to make sure that you get a grasp of all those research pieces. And now, without further ado, let me present to you the first paper. This is from Luria Gill and their colleagues, and they were mm, and they were researching leadership development in army, in specific in Israeli army. They were trying to see how leaders are emerging throughout the training inside the army. So there was a longitudinal study, 854 cadets and 72 trainers, and the three stages. The first part, the informal emerging of leadership, when all the cadets were all together, because in what I also got to know from this paper is that in this particular case, in their example, they don't recruit officers. The officers emerge from the basic training that every cadet goes through, and then from within the group decides themselves, they vote themselves who they think represents leadership in within their team, and that's how they choose the leaders. That's how they evaluate which candidates could probably make good officers. So this is the first part. Then there is a training for officers, 3 months of leadership development training with multiple different activities. And in this part also, the trainer plays a significant role, because in each group there is one trainer assigned who is playing a role of the platoon officer for those team members. So what they do is that they have 3 months of training, but it is also a part of simulation of real work in the army. And the officer gives them feedback, the trainer gives them feedback. They are watching them all the time, they are evaluating them all the time. There is plenty of different factors that come together to define if this particular leader is effective throughout the training. So those 3 months play two roles. Once you learn, but also you are evaluated. How good are you? How good the prediction from this small team, from the cadets, was to decide if you actually can be a good leader. And the third point of evaluation in this study was after the officers graduated this training. A year later, they were evaluated by their chiefs, by the officers higher in ranks, in terms of their leadership effectiveness throughout this year, when they actually played an active role as the officer in the army. So this was the form, this is the way they evaluated it. But what actually was very interesting to observe in here is if the effectiveness of the trainers in the academy influenced how good the participants were. So in other words, if we want to see, if we want to train leaders do we need to represent leadership attitudes ourselves, or is it independent in some way? Because all in all, what we do is that we create some fake environment, and we also learn how to teach. That's what we do as trainers. But actually, if being a good leader by ourselves is also important in this study. So these were the assumptions. And then, well, the first thing, what was very interesting is that um, the evaluation by the peers, by the cadets. So just sitting together and telling, I think that Mark, I think that Robert might be a good leader inside our team. This evaluation from all the team members was already a good predictor of how well the officer will go in the training and how well will they go in their further work. So this emerging leadership very easily evaluated, just asking your peers how they think, how good of a leader you are. This is already a good predictor of the actual leadership performance. The second result from this research um, is that the trainers who were high in leadership effectiveness, and they were evaluated the very same way, which is also standard. So they went through the training just like their participants at the moment. They went through it earlier on in their careers, and their evaluations, their leadership effectiveness from that point also predicted how well their cadets will perform. So the better the leader, the better the training, the better the results. It was important that the people who teach leadership actually have high scores in leadership efficiency by themselves. And finally, the way the participants performed in the training. So in those 3 months period of time, their scores from different tests, from different assignments, all of those are already standardized in this process. So there is plenty of measurement points, and altogether, this evaluation predicted how well will they perform in their actual work. And in here, there is something I'm not that confident to support the research, because what practical implication was suggested that during the training we might also evaluate who actually should work well in the leadership role. But in reality, this is actually happening, that in many development centers, leaders are also evaluated, but that's not the point of development center. That's the point of assessment center, and we really need to divide between development and assessment. Because when people know that they're evaluated and that this will impact their careers, they won't learn that much. They won't risk that much. They won't make errors. And through making mistakes, that's how we learn. So I'm not that sure if we should actually use the scores from training to any prediction, to any decisions in the business. Nevertheless, the authors presented that it actually does influence. One influences the other. What struck me the most is that we, as the educators, we are not that evaluated as the educators in the army. So we cannot tell, if I'm doing a leadership training and you're doing the leadership training, who is actually a better leader, who could deliver it better, since it influences our results. How actually, and maybe, yeah, the question is, how could we evaluate ourselves to figure out what can I do to be better in this topic, and therefore to teach it better. In leadership, there is plenty of scales, plenty of tests we could do. We could attend the training on leadership ourselves, get some development center metrics. But then there is so many more topics that we train in feedback, in motivation, in teamwork, in communication, that is a bit broader than just feedback, in problem solving, critical thinking. I would set a hypothesis that what we need to do whenever we teach someone is also to think, how am I actually good at this skill, and how can I improve in this particular skill? Because it's extrapolation. I'm not sure if it's true, but since it works in leadership, that being a better leader impacts the quality of leadership training you do, I would say that's true also for everything else. So we need to figure out how we can measure our quality, and this will help us to be better, to have some benchmarks, to know that there is still something to improve and something to keep in mind also, that we can always improve. This is the major outcome I took from this training. There is also uh, plenty more information in the publication. You can find it in on the screen and also in the notes from the podcast. And let's move on to the second one. In here we have Ella Malloy, which was comparing authentic and transformational leadership in sport. So the purpose was, um, in sports, in research in sports, there is a lot of papers on transformational leadership. That this is the way, this is the most effective approach to leadership, while the authors disagree. So they think that there is more to it, that transformational leadership cannot really explain all the success, all the commitment that the trainees, the pupils in the training business, in the training environment, are affected with. And they propose that maybe authentic leadership, as a term, as a model that is similar to transformational leadership but not equal to it, that it may be also giving some insights into how to be a better coach in sports. Um, there was plenty of research to give you a background. There was plenty of research that commitment and enjoyment in sports is extremely important. So, what the scientists were actually measuring, if those two models affect commitment and enjoyment in team sports. 421 athletes took part in this study, and they were evaluating their enjoyment, their commitment, and also their coaches in those two areas, in transformational and authentic leadership. And I'm a strong advocate of reading scientific papers, because I believe it's very efficient way of learning, of finding out something new. And just to give you a case, this paper is just few pages long, and you can really get a sense of what is transformational leadership and what is authentic leadership. So in transformational leadership, there is 4 I's. First is idealized influence. So the trainers, the coaches should be the role models for their trainees. The second one is inspirational motivation. So they try to give clear expectations, they try to demonstrate confidence, and they try to provide some meaning behind all the training that is necessary to achieve a mastery. Then intellectual stimulation. So in here, the trainers, the coaches are listening to their peers. They are also questioning some assumptions, inviting their trainees to question the assumptions, to find creative solutions to the problems they face. And lastly, um, individualized consideration. So creating this supporting climate, providing different learning opportunities, serving as mentors to their peers. And authentic leadership does have some similarities, but one of the major differences is that it really focuses on this relationship between leader and follower. So between the trainer and the trainee, in this particular matter. So the decisions are made together. The also in authentic leadership, the leader should be perceived credible, their work in line with their inner values, so they present this clear, authentic, transparent person that you can relate to, that you can be attracted to, and build a positive relationship with. And this also requires a strong self-awareness of the leader. So they should know their values, they should know what they pursue, what they believe in, what they want to achieve, and this authenticity comes from this self-awareness. So what was interesting in this study, first, as I told you, that in sports, the dominant model is transformational leadership. This motivational pep talks and engagement, challenging assumptions, challenging the beliefs about limitations and what is possible, what not, is the dominant model. But actually, the researchers found that authentic leadership is more correlated to enjoyment and commitment. Both transformational and authentic leadership didn't really explain those in total, so there is something else behind it, maybe personal interests of the team members, because no matter the trainer, if you just hate sports and your mom forced you to join the team, you won't love it, you won't feel committed, and you won't find enjoyment in that. But both authentic and transformational leadership do influence the enjoyment and commitment, and authentic leadership does it over twice as much. You can find in the paper the exact amounts of for each of those factors. But what struck me is that authentic leadership and transformational leadership did not explain the same part of enjoyment and commitment, which means that what we think about when we talk leadership is that there is one model, the other one is better, the other is worse. Maybe I will implement this one, I will implement that one. But in this research, what was realized is that authentic leadership is supporting transformational leadership, so both can work together. And seeing the differences, that in authentic it's really about the relationship between trainer and their trainee, it is just some additional practice that we need to implement, something that we need to consider to make ourselves better leaders in this particular setting. Because also what is important is to know that this was done in sports, which is a very specific environment, in team sports in specific. And enjoyment and commitment are very well related to performance in this particular setting. And authentic leadership and transformational leadership work well in those two. That would be it for this piece of research. And let me find another one for you. So here, one from Abigail Player that was published in Frontiers in Psychology. This one is quite triggering. 297 people participated in quite a simple study, which was trying to evaluate how men and women are perceived when applying for leadership positions in companies. The participants weren't recruiters. They were randomly chosen people. Most of them were working full time in different businesses, different areas of expertise. And just to point out in here, in one way, I find, because I was doing a lot of research, a lot of reading, a lot of research in recruitment. On one hand, this is a drawback that those are not recruiters, because those people are skilled to choose people for jobs, so they might be more or less influenced by some factors. But on the other hand, it shows the actual bias that we might have. So the research setting was very simple. There was 4 profiles of different candidates, and each of them had scores on two tests. One was a test of leadership potential, and the other one was test of leadership performance. So the one was sort of a self-evaluation of showing how potentially good this person could be in leadership, while the other one was external evaluation of performance, how they actually were working as leaders in their past job. And the participants of this research got a bit of explanation how exactly the evaluation looked like, so they knew what is the difference, and based on that they were supposed to make a decision which person to hire. And there were 2 experiments in this group, and in both the results were the same. So men with leadership potential were chosen more often than women with leadership potential. And the only situation when woman was chosen was when their performance was over the average. So in other words, when it comes to potential, men were chosen more frequently, but when it comes to performance, you need to kind of prove yourself to to be chosen if you are female. So the author started the publication with a quotation which I will cite to you. Women hold up more than half the sky and represent much of the world's unrealized potential. And in a way, this, together with plenty of other research in gender differences, shows that there are still some issues. And this bias, which is called overlooked potential bias, is just one of plenty. And this reminded me of a Moneyball movie. So the same situation that occurred in sports in baseball, where one team manager started, instead of just choosing by what they think whom could be the best performer in the team, they try to look into data and figure out what the data shows, and basing these decisions on pure data. And if I won't spoil you, just watch the movie and you will know what are the results. And in here, I think this approach is just as important, especially because, just as I told you in the beginning, since the participants of this study were not recruiters, they were randomly selected individuals. 79% of them were employed in different companies, and they followed this bias. I would say that this is innate in the cultures we live in. So we need to have some strong um, algorithm that could help us to prevent it. That's it. It was very straightforward paper, just checking one phenomenon, but I think it's really important to remember it, think how we could implement it in our recruitment for leadership positions. Then something on a more positive note related to gender differences. Cynthia Sims did a research in mentoring, and she was trying to see what are the differences in different leadership styles, and the way they express themselves in mentoring situations. So if we are prone to choose different styles or different mentoring approaches depending on our gender. um, there were 56 participants of the study, and they were all a part of leadership development programs, so people who are actually in the position. And it was, as far as I remember, there were a few years, I didn't note that down. The research was taking few years, so there were different cohorts of people who attended it from different groups. And just one thing to note down, apart from the research results, what I really, really love in this piece of research is that, first off, they covered multiple forms of leadership. So servant leadership, transformational leadership, transactional, passive avoidance leadership, and um, all of those are presented in one simple table. And just to give you an example of the one that we will be talking more about. So there is a servant leadership, and there are 5 subscales to it. So to be a better servant leader, you should create altruistic calling, emotional healing, wisdom, persuasive mapping, and organizational stewardship. And just to point out again why I love reading research so much is that you also have plenty of resources in here, which one will guide you to learn more about the specific leadership style you would like to know. And it's all backed by science, so we know that this is solid, something that we can build upon and learn from, which we cannot tell about plenty of knowledge available on the internet. So 5 subscales in servant leadership, And there is also transformational leadership described the same way, transactional leadership, and passive avoidant, and also the mentoring competency. And this is something interesting. When thinking of creating a mentoring system in our company, do we actually consider, okay, but which person will be suited the best to become a mentor? What kind of skills should they have? Or we just think, okay, um, Tom knows a lot about this topic, so maybe he should be the mentor, but maybe not. So there is also 26 item scale that in 6 different subscales that presents mentoring competency, and this includes effective communication, aligning expectations with our mentee, assessing understanding, fostering independence, addressing diversity, and promoting professional development. So we can assess our team members on this scale to try to find out who could be the mentor right now, or maybe in which skills they can develop to be better mentors in the future. Um, and then when it comes to results of this paper, one thing was that there was no significant difference among genders in terms of chosen leadership style and in terms of mentoring competencies. So we are all equal, at least in this field, which is I think beautiful, and looking forward to know of more fields that we are closing the gender gaps. And authors suggest that servant leadership is the one to choose when it comes to mentoring, because people who were with servant leadership as the dominant one were also the most um, proficient in mentoring, which doesn't mean necessarily that transformational leadership is bad. It was also related to mentoring, not that highly. So servant leadership was just perfect for mentoring, because in contrast with transformational leadership, servant one is the only one which is really about the other person. It is about this emotions, this altruism, understanding of the other person. While in transformational leadership, we actually still focus about the goal. We try to inspire the other person, but the goal is in the center, what we want to achieve. Something to remember. And also what was interesting in this paper was that mm, the author suggests that the mentor should be mentees first. So people in mentoring situation, when they are being mentored or being proteges of the other person, are learning mentoring in some different distinct way. So it's not really efficient and not really a good standard to just assign someone a mentor that they never have experienced this role before. Quite a pragmatic outcome, I would say. Something to also consider for the future. And then I think, let me just check my notes. Okay, so we can move on to the final paper I prepared for today. And this was done by a team of researchers from Sweden and United States, and they were evaluating emergence of shared leadership networks in teams. So what they tried to figure out is to see which shared leadership features contribute to the emergence of it. And it's quite interesting, because on one hand, shared leadership, so this form of leadership where everyone in the team or some parts of the team members are involved in leadership situations, they are taking a lead in different situations. This was research for a long time, but then there wasn't really that much research to understand how different features of shared leadership appear and contribute to the overall performance. And one why I like this paper is because it actually gives us concrete tools to measure shared leaderships in our teams. So in contrast with some research that tells us why some things work, in here, using the methodology, using the methods that are presented in the research, we can actually know how things work. And I think this is beautiful. We can really replicate it in our teams and understand better how shared leadership works in there. And then, so one thing that also you can find out from this paper is its background to understand better how this shared leadership emerges from the past research, so what we know already. And one thing is that the risk of rejection should be low. So people will engage in leadership situations. They will take, okay, I will lead, I will take over in this moment, I will run this meeting, I will run this part of the project, if the risk of rejection is low. So if they know whenever they claim leadership, they will get it granted. The other thing is that it works even better if this claim is granted by their team members. So they don't choose themselves, they don't volunteer, but they are asked by their team members to take this leadership role. And also, one very important factor from the past research, which is called transactive memory system. So this is a situation where we inside the team use our collective knowledge and treat it as a big knowledge ecosystem. Every part of our team is specializing in one particular field, and they have expertise in there. Everyone else acknowledges that and know that this is the field that this person is mostly expertise in. So whatever it is, it can be content based in terms of our work. It can be responsibilities based. There are multiple divisions, but this pure fact that we understand those differences, and we acknowledge them, we like them as the team members, is also important in this context. And the research that the researchers run in here was 90 teams, in total 450 people, and they were all doing the same case study, which is Mount Everest leadership and teamwork simulation that was designed by Professor Amy Edmondson. And well, for the first time, the researchers have shown some connections between different aspects of this shared leadership development. So there are two things in there. One is leadership decentralization. And this means this is a number that is presenting how many people inside the team are actually taking leadership responsibilities. Let's say we have 9 people in the team. If all of them are engaged in some leader-follower situations, the leadership decentralization will be high. And then the second factor is leadership density. This means how many leadership links exist in the team. So again, we have this team of 9 people, and then if all of them are involved, but everyone is only leading one person in the other team, there will be 9 links like that. But in another case, when there is one leader and is leading every other person in the network, it still is 9 connections. So actually, in a team of 9, we can create way more leadership links, and this number shows the leadership density of the team. And in the past research, those two were treated separately. So they both described the shared leadership, but actually, what the authors of this paper showed is that they are different. One just shows how many people are involved, and the other is how strong the shared leadership is in the team. Because if we have 9 people and every one of them is responsible for bringing post-its to the meetings, and one person is responsible for all the other decisions, how shared leadership it actually is? Not that much. So those two are both important, and they calculated in this research how important they are. And what appeared is that, first off, this transactive memory system that I was talking about, so this knowledge of expertise of different members, accepting it and using it as a kind of collective brain of the entire team, where everyone is specializing in just one part, so you don't have to worry about it, you can focus on your part. This was the very first predictor, and it predicted this leadership decentralization. So the more people know what the other person is responsible of, the more keen they are to delegate responsibility, delegate leadership. So the more leadership emerges. And in here, the authors pointed out that actually, in plenty of teams, what happens is that the leaders only involve people who are more extrovert, people who will opt in, who will raise their hands in the teams to take some leadership positions, take some leadership tasks in their teams, and not necessarily trying to involve everyone. But actually, from this research, it showed that this leadership decentralization, so involving as many people in even minor tasks that are leading, this also creates leadership density in the later stages. So leadership decentralization is a prerequisite for leadership density. And when you think about it, it makes a lot of sense. More people are engaged, more chances that there will be more situations where leader-follower situations occur. But actually, no one ever yet thought of it this way, and this is the biggest um, benefit from this particular research piece. So the also this concrete practices that can support this transactive memory system include um, diversifying team composition. So we on the time when we design the team, we already think who could run the best in this particular setting. Then we also change some elements within the team. That's another way. Or, as I was explaining earlier on, what they did in this research is that they included um, some role division within the team, so everyone knew what the other person are responsible of. And what is also interesting in this scientific paper, and something that might invite you to actually search for it and to read it carefully, is that it also gives a concrete intervention for it that you can use in the training. So to think how you actually can support creating this transactive memory system. As difficult as it sounds, it's pretty simple in practice, and it's all described in this paper. That would be it. 5 papers, 40 minutes. I was worried I will end up in 12, but actually, it took more time, and I didn't really make it to cover them entirely. Each of them deserve a separate episode to be really talked through. So I really wonder, how do you see this very rough, quick review of different scientific papers valuable? And if I should continue with different topics to just give you a glimpse of what was recent in research in a given field. And thank you very much. Next week, we have a special episode with a special guest on the topic of work design. Looking forward to it. And meanwhile, have a great afternoon. Thank you very much.